If this is to be our destiny, then so be it. Battle of the Bulge was not just a sprawling World War II epic, it was a cinematic powder keg loaded with creative gambles, historical distortion, and on-set near disasters. Beneath the sweeping tank battles and stirring musical score was a troubled production that pushed cast crews and credibility to their limits. Here are 20 weird facts about Battle of the Bulge that reveal the chaos beneath the spectacle. Fact number 20. The production of Battle of the Bulge never filmed in the real Ardennes, where the actual battle took place. Instead, it was shot mostly in Spain during the summer using fake snow made from salt plastic sheets and marble dust. The idea was to save costs and use available military equipment from the Spanish army, but the result was a surreal contrast. Actors sweltered in heavy winter uniforms under blistering sun, pretending to be frostbitten soldiers. The terrain was too dry, too bright, and far too smooth to pass for Belgium, but the crew used careful framing and fog machines to mask the truth. The battle may have been legendary, but the setting was pure illusion. Audiences saw icy warfare while the crew fought sunburns. What looked like a frozen front was actually a heat wave disguised in white powder. It was not winter combat, it was desert theater in full costume. Fact number 19. The tanks used in the movie were completely wrong for World War II. Instead of authentic Shermans or German Tigers, the production relied on post-war American M47 Patton and M24 Chaffee tanks, which were available through Spanish NATO stockpiles. These sleek modern machines were repainted and modified slightly to suggest the correct wartime models, but any historian or veteran could tell the difference instantly. The German Panzers were just Pattons, with new markings and some camouflage slapped on. It was a logistical shortcut that traded accuracy for convenience, and the result was a battlefield populated with machines that had never even existed during the war. The film's climactic armored clashes looked impressive, but they were essentially Cold War training tanks in disguise. Not history, just hardware reimagined. It was like telling the story of Gettysburg with helicopters. The steel was real, but the timeline was fantasy. It fooled audiences, but not veterans. Fact number 18. Henry Fonda was not happy with the script and made his feelings clear. As Lutkul Kylie, he was one of the film's central figures, but behind the scenes, he battled the producers over the story's inaccuracies. Fonda, who deeply respected veterans and had served during the war himself, was appalled at how loosely the screenplay handled military details and real strategy. He pushed for rewrites, lobbied for more authenticity, and even confronted the director about scenes that seemed flat-out fictional. But the studio brushed him off, reminding him it was an entertainment spectacle, not a historical documentary. Fonda later admitted in interviews that he only took the part for the paycheck and called the final cut a disappointment. His performance still brought weight and dignity to the role, but his heart was clearly elsewhere. He was not just battling Nazis on screen. He was battling Hollywood's indifference to truth. Fact number 17. A fiery explosion almost burned the entire production to the ground. During the climactic tank battle, a massive gasoline-fueled fireball was planned to simulate the destruction of oil drums, but something went wrong. The flames spread fast beyond the controlled perimeter, setting nearby props ablaze and nearly engulfing the camera crew. Panic erupted on set. A stunt performer was briefly trapped behind a blazing tank before being pulled to safety, and several crew members suffered heat exhaustion. The fire brigade arrived late, forcing a week-long shutdown to rebuild sections of the set and recheck safety procedures. What was meant to be the visual crescendo of the movie became a dangerous disaster barely contained in time. The scene made it to the screen with stunning impact, but behind that spectacle was a very real near-death experience. It was not a controlled stunt. It was a blazing reminder of what could go wrong. Fact number 16. Robert Shaw took method acting to chilling extremes while playing the Nazi officer Hessler. Even off-camera, he maintained a cold, authoritarian demeanor, refusing to break character between takes. He would walk around in full SS uniform, barking orders with a fake German accent and isolating himself from the rest of the cast. Some thought it was commitment to craft. Others called it unnerving. Henry Fonda reportedly asked the director to tone Shaw down after several tense encounters, but Shaw insisted on staying in character for emotional consistency. He even studied German military manuals in his hotel room and refused to eat with anyone not in his scenes. What emerged on screen was a frighteningly believable villain, but the cost was an alienated cast and awkward silences on set. Shaw was not just playing a Nazi. He had become one in spirit. The performance was powerful. The process was borderline terrifying. Fact number 15. One of the most iconic scenes featuring tanks rolling across open fields was filmed without a completed script. The production was so rushed and behind schedule that entire battle sequences were shot while the writers were still debating the final structure. Director Ken Anakin had to choreograph complex tank maneuvers with no idea how the shots would connect to the story. This led to multiple retakes where vehicles drove in circles just to pad runtime or create visual spectacle. Extras were told to look panicked or aggressive depending on the day's guesswork. The editing team had to stitch together scenes from disconnected action reels and mismatched lighting. What looks like tactical warfare on screen is really a patchwork of improvised chaos. Not every tank charge had a purpose. Some were just there to fill time. The battle raged on, set not just in the script but in the absence of one. Fact number 14. The real veterans of the Battle of the Bulge condemned the film publicly after its release. Many American and European veterans felt betrayed by the movie's fictionalized depiction of events, especially the glorification of German tactics and the omission of Allied suffering. Key historical moments like the Siege of Bastogne and the role of General Patton were erased entirely. Instead, the film invented characters like Colonel Hessler to anchor a Hollywood-style narrative that never happened. Some veterans groups even issued formal complaints to Warner Brothers accusing the studio of whitewashing history. They believed the film glorified the enemy and trivialized the cost of the battle. It was not remembrance, it was revisionism dressed as action. While general audiences applauded the explosions and tanks veterans sat in silence. What they saw was not their war. It was an alternate timeline with better lighting and fewer consequences. The wounds were still real. Fact number 13. The Spanish extras playing American and German troops were often drunk on set during night shoots. The production hired local conscripts and off-duty soldiers to fill the screen during large battle sequences, but offered little oversight once filming started. To keep warm during the chilly evenings, many of the extras brought bottles of brandy or wine to the set and began drinking between takes. By the time the cameras rolled, chaos broke out. Extras fell out of formation, missed cues, or tripped over props during charges. One entire night shoot had to be rescheduled because too many background soldiers had passed out by the time the cameras were ready. What looks like disciplined military action on screen was often a mess of staggered movements and shouted translations. It was not a well-oiled army, it was a weekend militia in costume. The illusion of order was saved only in the editing room. Fact number 12. The iconic tank duel between Shaw's Hessler and the American forces was entirely fabricated and mechanically flawed. The tanks were not only wrong models, but their movements were physically impossible in real combat. The showdown scene where Hessler's tank is surrounded and destroyed was blocked like a Western shootout, not a battlefield maneuver. Real tank crews who saw the film laughed or groaned at the tactics shown. Tanks lined up like chess pieces waited for cues and drove in tight circles for visual flair. The explosions were triggered by crew with hand switches hiding behind props. Even the terrain was manipulated to create dust clouds that looked like combat impact. It was not strategy. It was theater with props that weighed 40 tons. The scene may have thrilled audiences, but to any military eye, it was staged choreography masquerading as history. War turned into spectacle under a sunny Spanish sky. Fact number 11. Telly Savalas clashed with the director over how crude his character was portrayed. He played Sergeant Guffey, a hard-drinking, fast-talking soldier who runs black market deals and beds a barmaid mid-war. Savalas believed the role lacked dignity and bordered on comic relief instead of a real depiction of soldiers under stress. He tried to tone down the sleaze and add layers of grit, but the producers pushed for more antics and exaggerated charm. Savalas eventually gave in, but was reportedly frustrated by how the character became a sideshow to the main plot. Off-camera, he often avoided watching playback, calling it a clown show. His performance remains one of the most colorful in the film, but behind the scenes, he was anything but amused. What looked like charisma on screen was actually tension hidden under sunglasses. It was not just acting, it was swallowing creative pride for the paycheck. Fact number 10. The original cut of Battle of the Bulge ran nearly 3.5 hours, but studio executives demanded it be trimmed to fit more theatrical showings. This led to brutal edits that removed entire character arcs, including deeper scenes with Henry Fonda, and subplots involving the civilian population. Key transitions were chopped out so suddenly that scenes jump from day to night without warning. Continuity errors emerged because action sequences were rearranged to speed up pacing. The final cut premiered at just under 3 hours, but the cast and crew barely recognized their own work. Some of the most human moments were lost in the edit room. What could have been a sweeping, character-driven epic became a lean action machine focused only on noise and movement. It was not a war film anymore. It was a product shaped by ticket sales and studio scissors. Go ahead and like and subscribe because the truth behind this film's legacy is only getting weirder from here. Fact number 9. Charles Bronson was originally approached to play a major role in the film, but walked away after reading the script. He reportedly told producers the story was garbage and lacked any real understanding of soldier behavior or battlefield psychology. Bronson, who had actual military experience, felt insulted by the cartoonish depiction of war and refused to attach his name to it. His rejection created panic within the casting department, and they scrambled to fill the role with a less expensive actor. Bronson's absence was never publicly acknowledged during the film's promotion, but it cast a long shadow over the production. One of the toughest actors of the era saw through the spectacle and turned his back on it. That silence spoke volumes. Not every star can be bought when the story rings false. Sometimes walking away is the loudest critique of all. Fact number 8. The battle scenes were so chaotic that the crew began referring to the film as the Battle of the Budget. Each large-scale action sequence went over cost by thousands of dollars per day. Explosives misfired, vehicles broke down, cameras overheated in the Spanish sun. On one occasion, 2 tanks collided during a take and both had to be towed off-set, causing an entire day's shooting to be scrapped. The production insurance company threatened to pull coverage unless safety protocols were improved. Crews worked 16-hour days trying to capture scenes that were constantly changing based on weather and availability of extras. The chaos became so overwhelming that the assistant director collapsed from exhaustion mid-shoot. It was not a smooth operation. It was a spiraling logistical disaster filmed under smoke and sun. The only real miracle was that the movie got finished at all. Fact number 7. One of the film's most explosive visuals, tanks plunging into a fiery ravine, was nearly cut after test audiences laughed instead of gasped. The shot involved a full-scale tank model rigged to fall into a burning pit, but poor editing and awkward sound design turned it into unintentional slapstick. The fiery explosion felt too clean, and the miniature looked stiff as it tumbled. Studio executives considered reshooting the entire sequence, but the budget was already maxed out. Instead, they re-edited it 3 times and darkened the color grading to hide the flaws. What was meant to be a symbol of German defeat turned into an awkward punctuation mark. For some audiences, it was shocking. For others, it was funny. In trying to show the horror of war, the film accidentally created a moment of parody, not fear, but farce in flames. Fact number 6. The U.S. Department of Defense refused to cooperate with the filmmakers, and that decision shaped everything. Unlike other war movies of the era, which used Pentagon advisors and surplus gear, Battle of the Bulge received no official support. Why? Because the military hated the script. They found it historically inaccurate, manipulative, and said it failed to portray American bravery or strategy properly. Without access to U.S. Army archives props or stock footage, the filmmakers had to invent everything from scratch or borrow from foreign militaries. The lack of military endorsement was a quiet but powerful condemnation. What could have been an educational depiction became Hollywood invention running wild. Veterans noticed. So did military historians. And though audiences enjoyed the drama, the government's silence said it all. This was not a tribute to real soldiers. It was a fantasy forged in smoke and mirrors. Fact number 5. Battle of the Bulge used recycled sound effects from old westerns and submarine movies, causing bizarre audio mismatches. The rattle of German machine guns was lifted from cowboy shootouts, and the thunderous tank engines came from naval battles in black and white war films. During one key explosion, the audio track even included the stock sound of a collapsing mine shaft used in several 50s B movies. It was not laziness, but desperation. The audio team had too little time and too few resources to build a fresh library, so they pulled from whatever was in the studio vault. Sound designers warned the producers that trained ears would notice, but their concerns were ignored. What should have been immersive war audio ended up as a Frankenstein mix of unrelated booms and gunfire. The battlefield was real. The soundtrack was a reused echo from a dozen unrelated wars. Fact number 4. The female lead in the film was added solely to satisfy studio demands for romance, even though her scenes had no historical basis. Dana Winter's character was not based on any real person or documented wartime civilian figure. Her storyline was inserted late into the script at the insistence of producers who feared the movie would not appeal to female audiences. Her scenes with Telly Savalas were filmed separately from most of the main action and written by a different screenwriter. Even the actors joked that they were in a completely different film. Her romantic subplot about bartering eggs for favors and falling for an American soldier was widely criticized for slowing the pace and breaking tone. It was not love born from war. It was a love scene born from marketing fear. What audiences got was forced chemistry wrapped in bullets and smoke. Fact number 3. The massive battlefield finale was so poorly planned that extras were injured by flying debris. During the climactic tank clash, the effects team overloaded several explosives to increase visual impact. But one blast launched a steel panel from a mock tank straight into a group of extras who were ducking behind a trench prop. 2 background actors were knocked unconscious, and 3 others suffered minor shrapnel wounds. Shooting paused as medics rushed in and producers scrambled to avoid press leaks. The injuries were hushed up and paperwork was quietly filed to claim they were accidents during rehearsal. But the atmosphere on set changed. Suddenly, the fun of making war felt too real. Safety officers were brought in for the rest of the shoot, but the damage had already been done. It was not just pretend anymore. The explosions had crossed into dangerous territory. The fact number 2. Ken Anakin, the film's credited director, was quietly sidelined halfway through production. Though publicly he remained in charge, multiple second unit directors were brought in to helm key battle scenes and insert shots without his approval. Studio executives wanted faster shooting and more spectacle, while Anakin focused on character beats and pacing. As tensions mounted, producers began editing dailies without him, and even restructured sequences behind closed doors. Anakin later admitted that many scenes were shot in a style he did not endorse, and that his vision had been hijacked by the studio. The final cut reflects a tug-of-war between storytelling and spectacle. The director's hands were on the wheel, but someone else pressed the gas. What should have been a unified film became a stitched collage of competing voices. It was not auteur cinema, it was a war movie by committee. Fact number 1. The ending of Battle of the Bulge rewrites history completely and was criticized by military historians worldwide. In the film, the battle ends with Hessler's tank being destroyed and American forces celebrating victory on an open field. But in reality, the battle's resolution was far more complex, involving logistical support weather shifts and the encirclement of German troops by multiple Allied divisions. The movie's simplified resolution omits the role of the 101st Airborne, the heroic stand at Bastogne, and General Patton's pivotal counteroffensive. It offers instead a tidy Hollywood wrap-up where good triumphs with a single explosion. Historians called the film a dangerous oversimplification that could mislead generations. What the audience saw was victory through spectacle. What they missed was the sacrifice and coordination that actually turned the tide. It was not just inaccurate. It was a myth carved into celluloid and passed off as fact.